Molecular Laboratory.
A volcano erupted near Iceland's capital city, spewing red-hot lava and plumes of smoke out of a fissure.
About 100 tourists and spectators flocked to the scene, bewitched by the sight of the bubbling lava and intense roar from the ground. More details on this later in the news. Good evening. I'm CJ Hero.
And I'm Nina Richie Alago Flores. This is Mata ng Agila International. And now for the headlines.
As China commences its major military drills around Taiwan, ASEAN foreign ministers warn tensions could spark open conflicts. The Philippines reaffirms its support for the One China policy. Marcos lauds FVR as a symbol of stability as he pays his last respects to the former leader. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky wants to discuss Russia's invasion of his country with Chinese President Xi Jinping. And as inflation surges, the Bank of England is set to make its biggest interest rate hike in 27 years.
China's largest ever military exercises around Taiwan kicked off today in a show of force straddling vital international shipping lanes. This after a visit to the island by U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi that defied stark threats from Beijing. Pelosi, the highest profile elected U.S. official to visit Taiwan in 25 years, left the island Wednesday. China's military exercises began around 12 p.m. involving live fire drills. They took place in 6 major zones encircling Taiwan, at some points within just 20 kilometers or 12 miles of the island shore, and will conclude at midday on Sunday. Nationalist state-run tabloid Global Times said, citing military analysts, that the exercises were unprecedented and that missiles would fly over Taiwan for the first time. The group of 7 industrialized nations condemned the planned drills, saying in a statement that there was no justification to use a visit as a pretext for aggressive military activity in the Taiwan Strait.
Southeast Asian foreign ministers urged restraint as China launched massive military drills off Taiwan, warning the situation risked spiraling into open conflicts. At a meeting in Phnom Penh, ministers from the 10-member Association of Southeast Asian Nations, or ASEAN, warned against provocative action. The ministers said in a joint statement that the situation could lead to miscalculation, serious confrontation, open conflicts, and unpredictable consequences among major powers. The minister's statement, which avoided referring to Taiwan by name, said ASEAN stands ready to play a constructive role in facilitating peaceful dialogue, though it is not clear if either side is interested in outside mediation. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi is attending the summit along with his U.S. counterpart, Antony Blinken, though they are not expected to hold a one-on-one meeting. While Wang and Blinken are not scheduled to meet bilaterally, they will both attend on Friday a meeting of the ASEAN Regional Forum, or ARF, a 27-member body set up to discuss security issues that also include Russia and the EU. Kung Phuoc, Cambodia's deputy foreign minister and ASEAN spokesman, urged both sides to stabilize the situation.
The Philippines continues to adhere to the One China policy. The Department of Foreign Affairs, or DFA, made this clear at the meeting of the foreign ministers at the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, or ASEAN, in Cambodia. In a statement, the DFA said the Philippines is concerned with the rising tension in the Taiwan Strait, just north of the Philippines. The country has also urged restraints by all parties concerned, as diplomacy and dialogue must prevail. Under the One China policy, Beijing regards Taiwan as part of its territory, despite its assertion as a self-governing entity. Manila recognizes the People's Republic of China as the sole legal government of China and the island state as an integral part of the Chinese territory under the 1975 Joint Communique, which established the two countries' diplomatic relations.
Tensions continue to boil between China and Taiwan following U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's visit to the island nation. How will this affect the Philippines? Vin Pascua reports.
An international relations expert hopes that China-Taiwan tensions will not further escalate into an armed conflict. In an interview with Net25's morning program, ASPN, Ano sa Palagay Nyo, International Studies Professor Dr. Rene De Castro of De La Salle University said the Philippines will be trapped in the center of the conflict. He said the Philippines will be impacted given these three factors: geography, the Mutual Defense Treaty with the United States, and the overseas Filipino workers in Taiwan.
We only hope na this will just remain as a diplomatic crisis. This will not escalate into an armed conflict. Kasi if it escalates into an armed conflict, sapul ho tayo because of our geography. Napakalapit ho natin, maapektuhan ho tayo. Na madaming aspeto ho dyan, yung distance. Tapos tandaan ho natin, may mutual defense treaty tayo with the United States.
Correct.
We expect the U.S. to assist us sa South China Sea. The U.S. as an ally also expects us to assist them. Just in case you have, of course, armed contingencies elsewhere. Alliance is a two-way street. Hindi natin pwede sabihin, tulungan mo kami sa South China Sea, neutral kami sa ibang aspeto. Alliances do not work that way ho. Kaya dapat ho natin tandaan yan. At pangatlo ho, dapat natin tandaan, meron ho tayong 160,000 Filipino OFWs.
Ayun, correct.
Mga domestic help po dyan. Tsaka ho yung aspeto, ang concern ng US ho dyan, yung chips, yung mga factories na nagpo-produce ng microchips. Tandaan ho natin. Karamihan doon sa mga workers na yung Pilipino. Ngayon, pag nagkaroon ho ng gulo dyan, ang first knee-jerk reaction natin palagi, nakita natin ho doon sa Ukraine, is to evacuate them. We simply don't have the military capability, plus of course yung even commercial flights to evacuate 150 to 160,000 Filipinos in times of an armed conflict habang binobomba, sabi natin, ng Taipei or what. Paano natin gagawin yun?
Meanwhile, Deputy Director General Michael Eric Castillo of the National Security Council said the country must lay its contingency plan considering the emerging conflict in the Indo-Pacific region. Castillo said the Philippines should be alert to avoid being caught in the crossfire between warring parties. After the visit of Pelosi, China launched a live fire drill with missiles flying over Taiwan. Although no official announcement from the government has been made, Taiwan military experts recommend that the public prepare for the worst-case scenario. Vin Pascua reporting for Mata ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
As if the tension brought on by her Taiwan trip was not enough, U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi will reportedly visit the Demilitarized Zone, or DMZ, the border between South Korea and the nuclear-armed North. Pelosi is already in South Korea, where she has met with National Assembly Speaker Kim Jin-pyo and other senior members of parliament to discuss regional security and economic cooperation. China has considered the U.S. House Speaker's visit to Taiwan a major provocation, and its criticism of the U.S. has been echoed by both Russia and North Korea. North Korea even called the trip an impudent interference in China's internal affairs and blamed Washington for regional tensions. The North also warned it would never tolerate the United States for criticizing its nuclear program. Pelosi would be the highest-ranking U.S. official to visit the DMZ since former President Donald Trump met North Korea's Supreme Leader Kim Jong-un in 2019.
President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. paid his last respects to former President Fidel V. Ramos today at the Heritage Park in Taguig City. Eden Santos has the details.
This morning, President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. personally conveyed his condolences to the family of late President Fidel Valdez Ramos. The chief executive described Ramos as a symbol of his stability when he assumed the presidency.
I just reminded Mrs. Ramos how FBR, when he became president, was a symbol of stability. After all the tumultuous events of 1986, when he came into the presidency, he brought calm and he brought stability to our country.
Marcos said the country will always be grateful for FBR's service to the nation.
And for that, we will always be grateful to him and for all his service all throughout his life as a soldier and as a public servant. And for that, we clearly have suffered a loss for our country. But the memories of him will be good because of all the good work he did for the Philippines. Thank you.
Passing away at the age of 94, Ramos will be accorded the state funeral on August 9 at 10 o'clock in the morning at the libingan ng mga bayani. Marcos earlier declared a 10-day mourning period in honor of the former leader. Eden Santos reporting for Mata ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
The Armed Forces of the Philippines Western Command has successfully conducted a resupply mission at BRP Sierra Madre in Ayungin Shoal. According to the AFP Westcom based in Puerto Princesa City in Palawan, the resupply mission was concluded on August 2 through civilian boat MV Unaiza May. Apart from the supplies needed by the soldiers deployed in BRP Sierra Madre, the AFP also brought maintenance and repair equipment needed for the ship. The AFP Westcom said the resupply mission did not encounter any confrontation or harassment from forces of other claimant countries in the area. Up next, Ukrainian President Zelensky seeking direct talks with China's Xi Jinping to help end war in Ukraine. 7,000 treated for cholera as the disease spreads in Zabul, a province in Afghanistan. And Mexico races against time to rescue trapped mine workers. More stories coming up when Mata ng Agila International returns.
At saan mang panig ng mundo, ihanda na ang shopping list nyo dahil narito na ang online shopping show kung saan ang hanap nyo, meron dito. Narito na ang Shopping All the Way with Jojo A. Eat na hit? We have it! May sayawan, tawanan, pati naiyakan. Pati pets nyo mag-i-enjoy dito. But wait, there's more. Dahil pati celebrity sellers, makikipag-online selling din. At hindi lang yan, dahil may chance kayong makabili ng collectible items mula sa inyong mga paboritong artista. Kaya what are you waiting for? Add to cart na! Shopping All the Way with Jojo A. Opening soon sa Net25.
Welcome back to Mata ng Agila International. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky announced that he wants to directly discuss the Russian invasion of his country with Chinese President Xi Jinping. In an exclusive interview with the South China Morning Post, Zelensky said, and I quote, "I would like to talk directly. I had one conversation with Xi Jinping, that was a year ago," end quote. He quipped that he hopes that China might review its attitude towards Russia or toward Russia in light of its invasion of Ukraine. Since the beginning of the large-scale aggression on February 24, we have asked officially for a conversation, but we haven't had any conversation with China, even though I believe that would be helpful. That was Zelensky's statement. Zelensky also praised China, calling it a very powerful state and saying it had a powerful economy. He stressed that Russia's economy would seriously suffer should China take economic steps against Moscow over its conflict with Kyiv. The Ukrainian president also claimed that Beijing is trying to keep its sentiment regarding the Russian invasion balanced, but he also insisted that the major Asian power had an obligation to do more as a permanent member of the United Nations Security Council.
Russia's peacekeeping force stationed in the disputed Nagorno-Karabakh region reported 3 ceasefire violations by Azerbaijani troops. Separately, the nation's defense ministry said in a statement that Azerbaijan's armed forces have conducted a military operation against Nagorno-Karabakh militias, which sought to establish new combat positions in the region. The Armenian Ministry of Defense also confirmed the deaths of at least 2 soldiers in an attack by Azerbaijan, saying 14 other servicemen had been injured. Russian peacekeepers vowed to stabilize and resolve the situation by working with both the Azerbaijani and the Armenian sides.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says if Russia really wanted to end the war, it would not be bringing its reserves to the south of Ukraine.
Довгостроковій перспективність. Вони раптово вирішили визначити азовців терористами, хоча коли це робить держава-терорист, то це, очевидно, абсурдно. Вони активують різних емісарів з тезами про те, що держава-терорист ніби хоче переговорів.
Zelensky says Russia's decision to label Ukraine's Azov regiment a terrorist organization is obviously absurd.
Якщо б Росія дійсно, реально хотіла закінчення війни, вона б не стягувала зараз резерви на український південь і не плодила б на українській території масові могили убитих, невинних людей.
A blacksmith in Ukraine has come up with a unique way to help his country's war effort. Just a few months ago, Anton Zaika ran a modest but successful business exporting metal furniture to wealthy European clients. With the beginning of the Russia-Ukraine conflict 5 months ago, his priorities changed. His product line is different. It now includes anti-tank barriers to protect the local volunteer battalion in the northwest. He also makes special iron stoves adapted to the trenches to keep them warm. He's made about 500 of them so far. Zaika is giving his services free of charge to the local territorial defense unit. He has even started buying and converting beat-up old cars into makeshift armored personnel carriers. Zaika is getting a lot of support from people. They are bringing materials to his workshop that can be put to use in the trenches or military shelters.
Malaysia's foreign minister is urging all sides to tread very carefully after U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's visit to Taiwan. Pelosi's visit has enraged China, which has vowed punishment. Saifuddin Abdullah says the situation is tense right now.
And we believe it is vital for the concerned parties to address this situation very carefully because we want to ensure that peace, stability, and prosperity of the region will be maintained.
For being with us today. I wanted
Malaysia adheres to the One China policy. On another issue, Abdullah says the execution of 4 activists by Myanmar is disrespectful to the leaders of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations.
What happened recently, the execution of the 4 activists, is like a slap, or it's like the junta making a mockery of the 5-point consensus. There's no respect to the ASEAN leaders. There's no respect to the ASEAN chair.
ASEAN's consensus plan on the Myanmar conflict calls for an end to the violence, as well as talks between the army and coup opponents.
Rescuers are battling to free around 9 workers believed to be trapped in a coal mine in northern Mexico. According to President Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador, or AMLO, military personnel and rescue dogs have been deployed to the site of the accident in the state of Coahuila. AMLO tweeted that a coal mine collapsed in the municipality of Sabinas, Coahuila, which caused a tunnel to flood and apparently trapped 9 miners. The president added that they hope to find them safe. Anxious relatives gathered at the mine waiting for news, some crying as television images showed. Coahuila, the country's main coal-producing region, has seen a series of fatal mining accidents over the years. The worst was an explosion that claimed 65 lives at the Piastre de Conchos mine in 2006. Last year, 7 miners died after they were trapped in another accident in Coahuila.
Part of Beirut's grain silos have collapsed just days before the 2nd anniversary of a catastrophic explosion at the Lebanese capital's port that ravaged the stores and swathes of the city. According to reports, a cloud of dust covered the port after the partial collapse of the silos. Authorities say the partial collapse came after a fire broke out at the silos earlier this month, caused by fermentation of remaining grain stocks along with soaring summer temperatures. Army helicopters doused the area with water to try to put out the blaze. The complex had absorbed much of the impact of the August 4, 2020 mega blast at the port that killed more than 200 people and injured over 6,500. The silos shielded much of the city's west from the devastating effects of the blast, which was caused by haphazardly stored ammonium nitrate fertilizer catching fire.
Thousands of Afghan citizens have been receiving treatment for cholera, with medics scrambling in Zabul as the disease spreads in the region. One patient named Azizullah said the pandemic disease cholera is quickly infecting all people in the province. Medical staff are already treating patients in 2 buildings, some of whom are already with intravenous fluids. Health officials in the country warned of outbreaks back in June following a deadly earthquake. The disease, passed on through contaminated food and water, is treatable, but only if the medicines are available. Local estimates put deaths from the current outbreak at around a dozen.
Some harsh words from the Secretary General of the United Nations to oil company executives. Antonio Guterres says it's immoral for oil and gas companies to be making record profits on the backs of the poorest people and communities in the world. Guterres has some advice for governments and consumers alike.
Tax these excessive profits and use the funds to support the most vulnerable people through these difficult times. And I urge people everywhere to send a clear message to the fossil fuel industry and their financiers that this grotesque greed is punishing the poorest and most vulnerable people while destroying our only common home, the planet.
Guterres adds that many countries are drowning in debt and struggling to recover from the pandemic. He says we are already seeing warning signs of economic, social, and political upheaval that will leave no country untouched.
German Chancellor Olaf Scholz said his government could postpone the planned closure of its remaining nuclear power plants, marking a major U-turn for his government policies. John Pabustan from Germany reports.
German Chancellor Olaf Scholz on Wednesday raised the possibility of keeping nuclear plants going, as he accused Russia of blocking the delivery of a key turbine to throttle gas supplies to Europe. The continent's biggest economy has been scrambling for energy sources to fill a gap left by a reduction in gas supplies from Moscow. Standing next to the turbine, Scholz said that extending the lifetime of Germany's 3 remaining nuclear power plants can make sense. The power stations, which are set to be taken off the grid at the end of the year, were relevant exclusively for electricity production and only for a small part of it, Scholz said. In total, the nuclear fleet accounts for 6% of Germany's electricity output. The government has said it will await the outcome of a new stress test of the national electric grid before determining whether to stick with the long-planned phase-out. This is John Pabustan from Germany, reporting for Mata ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
The end of the legislative tunnel is in sight. The French Parliament definitively approved the first part of the package of measures in favor of purchasing power. The first big piece of the mandate was largely validated in the National Assembly by 395 votes. This emergency text carries a total of 20 billion euros or $20.3 billion in spending.
L'ensemble du texte, voici le résultat du scrutin, qui est le scrutin 152. Donc sur l'ensemble du texte, compte tenu de l'ensemble des délégations de vote accordées par les sénateurs aux groupes politiques et notifiées à la présidence, nous avons un nombre de votants 344, nombre de suffrages exprimés 272, pour l'adoption 245 et contre 27. Le Sénat a donc adopté.
Bruno Le Maire has shown himself determined to protect the French economically during the health crisis, while being the guardian of public finances in the face of the assaults of the opposition. The bill facilitates the restart of coal-fired power plants and creates a derogation regime to speed up the supply of gas through a floating LNG terminal, much to the chagrin of the environmentalists. Later in the news, volcanic fissure erupts again near Iceland's capital. A French sailor survives 16 hours in a capsized boat. And Mexican President Obrador allows access to declassified Navy documents. These and more stories when Mata ng Agila International returns.
Cannot deny that the value of our money now can afford much less than it could a year ago. Maraming mga bagay ang nakaapekto sa ating ekonomiya at ang karamihan sa atin ay nagulat dahil tayo ay hindi handa. How do we stretch our budget and still save a few? Kapos na nga ang pera, mag-i-invest pa ba? Perhaps it's timely for us to discuss how we can mitigate the effects of the economic crunch and still be able to tide over the wave of financial uncertainties by learning how to grow our money.
If you live simply, then what you need to save will be a smaller amount. But if you live grand, and of course, mas malaki rin yung kailangan mong ipunin. It's not what you make, it's what you save.
Open for business with Cesar Vallejos, Sunday, 9 p.m.
Yan ang idol ko. Pagdating sa aksyon, epic Gison. Comedy yan eh. Idol, epic Gison. Horror yan eh. Pwede po ba magtanong? Istorbo ka eh. Pinanonood namin pelikula ni Epic Gison. Mahal?
Mahal.
Mahal. Mahal. Oo. Mahal. Yung movie namin dapat ang nanalo. Hindi naman magaling yung nanalo eh.
Sino ba yung nanalo ka?
Eric Gison.
mata ng Agila International. After an 8-month rest, a volcano in Iceland has awakened. The volcano is just over 30 kilometers from the capital of Reykjavik and began spewing lava Wednesday morning. Despite warnings from authorities to stay away, about 100 people gathered to watch red-hot lava bubble up out of the ground. The eruption was the 7th in 21 years and was triggered by a series of earthquakes. The airport has remained open since there has been no ash plume. Gases from a volcanic eruption, especially sulfur dioxide, can be elevated in the immediate vicinity and can also be carried by the wind. Those gases may pose a danger to health and even be fatal.
A 62-year-old Frenchman survived for 16 hours at sea by using an air bubble inside his boat after it capsized. The 12-meter vessel, which had set sail from Portugal's capital, Lisbon, sent out distress signals from the Atlantic Ocean. Along with 3 helicopters, a rescue ship carrying 5 divers set off to find and rescue the man who has not yet been named. Though the Coast Guards found the upturned boat, the sea was too rough to rescue him. Left with no choice, the old sailor had to wait until the morning. A diver was hoisted onto the ship's hull to seek signs of life, and the man responded by banging from inside. The next day, 2 divers swam under the boat to help the sailor out, whom they found wearing a neoprene survival suit and submerged in water up to his knees. The man then jumped into freezing water and swam towards the sea's surface. Coast Guard divers exclaimed that the man's survival was verging on the impossible. In a tweet, Spain's Maritime Safety and Rescue Society said, "Each life saved is our biggest reward."
Venezuela's President Nicolas Maduro denounces the request by the United States to seize a Venezuelan Boeing 747 aircraft, which is at the heart of an international dispute and has been grounded in Buenos Aires since June.
Y ahora pretenden robarnos un avión propiedad de Venezuela, legalmente propiedad de Venezuela en Argentina, por mandato de un tribunal imperial del estado de la Florida en los Estados Unidos. Venezuela levanta su voz de protesta y pide la solidaridad de la gente honesta del pueblo argentino.
Last month, a seizure order alleged that U.S. export control laws were violated when Emtrasur acquired the plane in an operation with Mahan Air. The airline, affiliated with the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, is considered a terrorist organization by the White House. But Maduro said the plane was used to transport medicines to Venezuela from countries such as China, Russia, or India, aside from bringing humanitarian aid to Caribbean nations. The president also said that before flying to Argentina with auto parts, the plane was in Paraguay in May, carrying a shipment of cigarettes to the Caribbean island of Aruba. Earlier, Maduro's government suffered a judicial setback on the issue of $1,900 million of gold reserves from Venezuela to the Bank of England.
A promise from Mexico's president to allow access to military archives concerning the country's so-called dirty war. The dirty war occurred during the 1960s and 70s. More than 1,200 people disappeared without a trace during an internal battle involving various groups fighting the government. President Andrés Manuel López Obrador says he wants to open the books on the conflict to clarify the facts. He wants to ensure that such acts carried out by the Mexican state are not repeated, saying he wants to punish those who were responsible.
Today marks exactly 5 decades since Ugandan dictator Idi Amin announced the expulsion of Asians from his country. Here's Ashley Espiritu to tell us more about the story of the Ugandan South Asian exodus to Leicester, a city of the UK.
50 years ago, dictator Idi Amin announced his intention to expel Uganda's thriving community of British South Asians. They were given 90 days to leave or be rounded up into concentration camps. More than 27,000 ethnic Indian and Pakistani holders of UK passports made their way to Britain, which reluctantly took in its former colonial subjects. Many of them came to the English Midlands city of Leicester, and many arrived penniless after Idi Amin expropriated their wealth in a purported drive to give Uganda back to ethnic Ugandans. Overcoming English racism and whether the refugees rebuilt their lives from scratch, as chronicled in a new exhibition marking the anniversary of Idi Amin's decree of August 4, 1972. Exhibition curator Nisha Popat pointed to parallels today in Britain's generosity, or lack of, towards refugees. She states, the intention was about showing the impact of refugees, what they went through, and the impact they can have on a place. As well as the exhibition, Leicester's Curve Theatre is staging 3 plays to mark the anniversary. Reporting from London, United Kingdom, I'm Ashley Spiritu from Atanang Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
Sergio Massa is sworn in as new Argentina's Super Minister of Economy by President Alberto Fernandez in a ceremony attended by political leaders, businessmen, and trade unionists. Massa, a 50-year-old lawyer who has just resigned from the presidency of Chamber of Deputies, was sworn in before President Alberto Fernandez in an event attended by political leaders, businessmen, and trade unionists.
Tenemos una gran oportunidad como país, no la dejemos pasar por alto. Nosotros estamos empezando una etapa del gobierno que estoy convencido, lo conozco a Sergio hace muchos años, vamos a transitar exitosamente, con todos y con todas incluidos.
The Super Minister will concentrate under his command 3 portfolios of the economic and productive area. Massa is soon expected to announce his first measures to try to overcome a few weeks of much volatility in Argentinian markets as inflation skyrockets and poverty rises.
Guatemalan journalist Jose Ruben Zamora reiterated that President Alejandro Giammattei and Attorney General Consuelo Porras is behind his arrest in a case he called a setup. Zamora heads the newspaper El Periódico, which is a media outlet critical of the government of Giammattei. The paper published claims about alleged corruption cases involving Giammattei and Porras. Zamora was captured at his residence, but authorities also raided his newspaper's headquarters.
Quisiera decirles que este es un montaje, fue un montaje diseñado, fabricado, ejecutado con eficacia desde el presidente, la fiscal general y otras personas.
The public ministry accused Zamora of an alleged blackmail plot against a local banker for about $25,000. But the journalist denied the accusation, but acknowledged that he has known the businessman for several years. The Special Prosecutor's Office Against Impunity maintained that the accusation against Zamora is in the capacity of a businessman and not a journalist, a statement rejected by the newspaper and the press union. The Guatemalan government also clarified it has nothing to do with Zamora's detention. The arrest of Zamora has sparked a wave of calls to respect freedom of expression and warnings of attacks on independent media.
Senegal's opposition calls for the suspension of the publication of the legislative election results to examine complaints over alleged irregularities and fraud.
Yooyu dañu ne c'est des hommes politiques ñoo organisé avec certainement la complicité de l'administration un système de fraude, mais ça n'a rien à voir avec le Fouta. Loolu la ñu bëgg a wax ma ne tentative boobu nga xam ne dañoo bëgg a confisquer suñu vote loolu la ñu ne duñ ko nangu ki may njëkk a lancé appel nag mooy président Macky Sall moom ci boppam dafa am mbir di toll un homme doit savoir être grand.
Death Fall A member of the opposition also asks the president of the National Commission for the Consensus or for the census of votes to allow the opposition intercoalition to review the results poll by poll. Fall pleads that they can even do the review in a public session so that the Senegalese people can see what he calls unacceptable irregularities. The opposition further claims that there are reports that have no signatures, neither from the administration nor from the representatives of the coalitions making it. Hence, the group concludes it is unacceptable that these reports are validated. Both the government and opposition camps are claiming victory over the seats in the National Assembly, which is largely controlled by the presidential coalition.
Already baking under a prolonged hot spell, locals and tourists in Madrid, Spain are trying to cool off amid extreme heat. Temperatures are set to reach 40 degrees Celsius in several areas this week, with one man selling ice cream saying he has never seen heat like this. Ice cream vendor Tomas Corsino says he doesn't remember experiencing heat of this kind ever. He says this must be because of people's mistakes. Tourists and locals agree. Madrid is nice, but just is very hot.
Central America has 50 million residents and has a 60% poverty rate. It is exposed to extreme weather, volcanic eruptions, and cyclones from June to November, which cause floods. Experts say in the region, the cheapest areas to live in are usually also the most vulnerable zones. Sandra Ramos, whose home was damaged by hurricanes Eta and Iota, recalls how scared they were when they looked at the river filling up excessively, with some parts of it going out into the valley. Ramos says when they heard the bridge broke, they didn't take anything with them when they fled. All they had were just the clothes they were wearing. Being in a risk zone, she says, they can never be at ease.
There may be more electrical power cuts in France because of a scorching heat wave. The rising mercury has driven up the temperatures on the Garonne River. Aside from warmer water, the heat is causing a drop in water levels. Fishermen say the river has receded by up to 100 meters in some places, and that is limiting its ability to provide cooling for the country's nuclear power plants. The state-owned electrical utility says it will reduce output for a few hours every day, but it rules out shutting down the plants completely. Southwest France is in its third heat wave since June.
Meanwhile, a huge wildfire in Northern California has claimed at least 4 lives. Another 3,000 people have been told to leave their homes. The blaze, known as the McKinney Fire, has already destroyed 100 structures. Rain and cooler conditions brought some relief to hundreds of firefighters battling to protect the 8,000-person town of Wairika. But the human cost of the inferno is already mounting. Authorities say 2 of the victims were found in a car on Sunday. It is believed they were caught in the flames as they tried to escape. Details of the other 2 deaths have not been released. Firefighters are working to contain the fire using bulldozers to create fire breaks. They were also battling spot fires, which erupt as sparks shoot off from the main blaze and ignite some distance away. California is in the midst of a drought, made worse by man-made climate change. It has left the countryside parched and vulnerable to naturally occurring wildfires that have become hotter, faster, and more destructive. Up next, Bank of England imposes its biggest interest rate hike in 27 years. Russians flock to H&M for final sales before the firm pulls out. And directors shocked after Warner Brothers and Discovery axed the Batgirl film. Stay tuned and find out more when Agila International returns.
Pagdating sa creativity, pangmalakasan tayo mga Pinoy dyan. Mula sa music, pelikula, paintings at kung ano-ano pang artistic media. Magaling tayo dyan. Halina't basagin natin ang misteryo ng itlog art.
Burning desire po kasi yung nagtutulak sa'yo na gawin yung mga ganyang obra. Passion po siya. Nagbibigay saya sa inyo habang ginagawa nyo.
Drawing inspiration from malunggay na bukod sa superfood ay BFF pa ng lahat ng breastfeeding mothers. Nakagawa ng isang healthy alternative to coffee ang isang enterprising mommy. Starting with a dream and just 2 liters of Carabao's milk, nagawa niyang palaki ng kanyang negosyo.
It takes courage, it takes effort, it takes passion for you to succeed in business.
Isa siyang teacher mula sa Imus, Cavite at nakatira sa isang barangay na madalas bisitahin ng pagbaha. Kaya naman nung tumama si Ulysses, naging tulay ito. Hindi lamang para maging viral ang kanyang extraordinary heroism. Ako po ang inyong host, Aga Mulak, na laging nagpapaalala sa inyo, you can be the hero that someone needs.
Scientists from MIT's Computer Science and Artificial Intelligence Laboratory and Stanford University let robots take their hand at playing with dough. The aim is to put these visual inputs in a new system called RoboCraft, which could one day enable the robots to become better home assistants. With just 10 minutes of data, the two-finger robot gripper can perform on par with humans and at times even better on the tested tasks. Young-Ju Lee, CSAIL PhD student and author of a new paper about RoboCraft, says modeling and manipulating objects with high degrees of freedom are essential capabilities for robots to learn how to enable complex industrial and household interaction tasks. Further, in the future domain, scientists envision using the RoboCraft for assistance with household tasks and chores, which could be of particular help to the elderly or those with limited mobility.
The Bank of England is expected to follow other major central banks with an aggressive interest rate hike to tackle surging inflation. British inflation jumped to a 4-decade high of 9.4% in June, worsening a cost of living crisis as workers' wages failed to keep pace. From London, Ryan Florentino reports.
The Bank of England is set to make the biggest hike in interest rates for 27 years to 1.75%, amid warnings that inflation could hit 15% at the start of next year. The Bank of England's Monetary Police Committee, or MPC, may raise interest rates by 0.5% from 1.25% as part of aims to bring inflation back under control, but the Resolution Foundation has warned that further financial misery may come. While prices of some global commodities, including oil, have fallen from their peaks, the price of gas is currently devastated households and their budgets. Gas prices are expected to be around 50% higher this winter compared to the previous year due to worldwide issues. It comes as the annual energy bill this winter is already forecast to hit £3,615, according to analysis by energy consultant Cornwall Insights. And despite optimism that business investments and the release of new products will aid growth in the coming months, firms continue to worry about the impact of high inflation, rising interest rates, and recession risks for the UK and global economy. Reporting from London, United Kingdom, I am Ryan Florentino for Matanang Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
Another major foreign business is pulling out of Russia. Swedish fashion retailer H&M says operational challenges and an unpredictable future have prompted the company to wind down its operations in the country. CEO Helena Helmerson says, given the current situation, it is impossible to continue doing business in Russia. As the company prepares to liquidate its stock, Muscovites lined up outside an H&M clothing store for the company's final sales. The company paused all sales in March after Russia invaded Ukraine. It is reopening its stores for a limited time to sell its remaining inventory. H&M has operated in Russia since 2009 and employs 6,000 people there. It joins several other foreign corporations, including Starbucks and McDonald's, that have decided to exit Russia. The pullout is expected to cost the company $192 million, or nearly 10 billion pesos.
Airbnb said travel demand remains strong despite concerns about economic slowdown and rising prices hitting households. From April to June period, around 104 million nights and experiences were booked on the platform, a record high for the lodging website. Overall, bookings in the April to June period rose 25% from last year to 103.7 million and up 24% from 2019. Long-term stays continue to be the fastest-growing type of travel, a shift driven by the rise of remote work, but international and city travel, which had lagged, have also recovered. Despite the removal of China listings in July, Airbnb still has more than 6 million active listings on the platform. Executives said the buyback program was a sign of their confidence in the company's future. The company reported a profit of $379 million compared to a loss of $68 million last year.
Oreo's pumpkin spice sandwich cookies are hitting store shelves on August 15, marking their return following a 5-year hiatus. Take a look. The company's limited edition flavor features 2 golden Oreo cookies with a festive pumpkin spice flavored cream sandwiched in the middle. The launch of the Oreo pumpkin flavored items this August captured the excitement of buyers, as seasonal items bring a new sense of taste with a variety of flavors for the consumers to choose from. Oreo regularly releases limited-time flavors to spark customer excitement, such as the chocolate confetti cake for its birthday and a Lady Gaga flavor. Owned by Mondelez, the 110-year-old Oreo brand continues to grow, releasing unique flavors as part of the company's goal to increase the sales of the brand by $1 billion next year.
Oscar Piastre said he will not drive for Alpine in Formula One next year, barely an hour after the team announced that he would replace departing 2-time world champion Fernando Alonso. Alpine released a statement saying that the 21-year-old would be promoted from his role as reserve driver in line with the commitments made by the team to the young Australian. But Piastre then said on social media that he had not signed a contract with Alpine for 2023. I understand that without my agreement, Alpine F1 have put out a press release late this afternoon that I am driving for them next year, wrote Piastre, saying the announcement was wrong. Contacted by AFP News, Alpine refused to comment on Piastre's denial, sticking with the team's initial statement.
The directors of Batgirl were shocked that the $90 million superhero film had been axed by the studio and would not be released in any format. Warner Brothers Discovery announced that they were shelving the movie adaptation of the DC Comics character, which was to star Leslie Grace in the title role alongside Michael Keaton as Batman. WB's decision means the Batgirl movie will not be seen in either theaters or on the streaming platform HBO Max. We are saddened and shocked by the news. We still can't believe it, directors Adil El Arbi and Bilal Falah wrote on Instagram. They continued that as directors, it is critical that their work be shown to audiences. And while the film was far from finished, they wish that fans all over the world would have had the opportunity to see and embrace the final film themselves. The movie had completed principal photography and much of the post-production work where special effects, sound and graphics are added was also done. The move sent shockwaves through Hollywood, where industry veterans said it was unprecedented for a movie so close to completion and with so much money already spent to not be released.
Scientists have discovered 6 new species of miniature frogs in the deep forests of Mexico. The species are so tiny that they fit on top of a British 50-pence coin with lots of room to spare. Progastor bruvinus frogs are among the smallest frogs in the world and are no larger than 15 millimeters. Scientists say the frogs were undetected for so long due to their small stature, coloring, and their similarity to existing species. Scientists want the species to be classified as endangered because the frog's habitat is declining in quality and they haven't been found in many regions. Dr. Eric Smith, professor of biology at the University of Texas at Arlington, says despite the progress made in identifying the new species, more research is needed to understand the diversity of the miniature amphibians in Mexico.
Here's what happened today in history. In 1944, 15-year-old Anne Frank and her family were captured by the Nazi secret police from their hiding place in Amsterdam. All were sent to concentration camps, with only Anne's father, Otto Frank, surviving. It was him who arranged for the publication of Anne's diary as The Diary of a Young Girl in 1947 and who oversaw its adaptation to both theater and film. In 1961, Barack Obama was born in Honolulu, Hawaii. Obama became the 44th president and the first African-American president of the United States in 2009. In that same year, he was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for his extraordinary efforts to strengthen international diplomacy and cooperation between peoples. And in 2021, the global known COVID-19 caseload passed 200 million. That figure was more than the populations of Germany, France, and Spain combined. On that day, the official tally stood at 4.2 million deaths worldwide. Now, the global death toll is at 6.41 million.
Our telecast ends with an observation from Swiss-American psychiatrist Elisabeth Kubler-Ross. She said, "The most beautiful people I've known are those who have known trials, have known struggles, have known loss, and have found their way out of the depths."
I agree, fully agree.
Yeah.
And that's a wrap for tonight's news. Catch the latest updates in our social media channels. I'm CJ Hero.
And I'm Nina Richie Alago Flores. This is Mata ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.